Sam here from Sugar Spun Run. Today we're making my favorite pumpkin cupcakes. I've been making this recipe for a long time and it has stayed my favorite for, I think we're coming up on a decade now. To get started, get your oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Grab a large heat-proof mixing bowl. So in the mixing bowl, we are going to place 3/4 cup, which is like 1.5 stick or 165 grams, I believe, of butter. And this is already a little bit softened, but I'm going to break it up a bit because we're going to toss this in the microwave to melt the butter. Melted butter makes these cupcakes super moist, flavorful, and just gives them a really nice texture. Once our butter is nice and melted, it's probably going to be a bit too warm to move forward with it. But while it's warm, I like to add my spices just to help develop the flavor a little bit. So this is 1 tablespoon of pumpkin spice. If pumpkin spice isn't available at your store, I do have a really quick and easy recipe on how to make it at home using spices you may already have on hand. I do like to amp up the cinnamon flavor a little bit, so we also add a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And I'm just going to mix this into the butter now. Whisk would work really nicely here. I'll whisk it to break up the spices a little bit. Use my little baby whisk. You don't want any pockets of spices. Okay, so the butter is going to be a little bit too warm for us to go any further with this. So we're going to grab a separate mixing bowl and combine our dry ingredients. First thing we will need is 1 1/4 cups, which is like 150 grams of all-purpose flour. We're also going to add our sugar here with the flour. This is a 1/2 cup or 100 grams of granulated sugar and a 1/4 cup of firmly packed light brown sugar. And then we're also going to add 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder, 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and just a 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. Sometimes I do a slightly heaping 1/2 teaspoon. All right, let's mix everything together, get all of these ingredients nicely combined. Let's make sure we get all of those brown sugar lumps broken up. I like this method of adding the sugar here with the dry ingredients because it gives us a really nice texture that kind of leans a little bit towards like pumpkin bread. Instead of traditionally creaming the sugar or even reverse creaming. All right, we can slide that out of the way for the time being. Let's bring back our butter. Feel the bottom of the bowl. It should not feel warm to the touch. If it does, just give it a couple more minutes. Now, once your butter is in a good place, we are going to add our pumpkin puree. So this is canned pumpkin puree. I like using Libby's a lot for like a nice uniform flavor. Do not use pumpkin pie filling, usually sold, right next to each other in a can that looks very similar. And use caution if you're making your own pumpkin puree. It needs to be made properly. You can't just take like any pumpkin and like puree the inside. It's not gonna turn out too well. So that's just a word of caution. So I'm just going to use my baby whisk, which is a little small for this job. I'm just going to whisk that puree in to the butter, which is going to help things combine a little bit better. In the next step, it's gonna look a little bit funky. That's normal. And let's grab our eggs. I'll crack them into this bowl. You want 2 large eggs and they should be room temperature. It's going to be important. Otherwise, cold eggs can kind of like seize the butter and they make a batter that's not very uniform. It doesn't really bake all too well. I don't know why I threw that in there. Move these out of here. Our second egg, and we're actually going to add our vanilla extract here as well. We're going to use 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Okay, if you want to be a little generous with the vanilla for this recipe. All right, we'll whisk everything together really well, get that nicely combined. I want these eggs nicely incorporated. And finally, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of milk. I recommend a whole milk for this recipe. Most will probably work, honestly, even buttermilk, but whole milk is what I use to test it, is what I should be saying. Let's do a quick scrape of the bowl, make sure everything's really well incorporated. And now we're going to add our dry ingredients, and we're just going to drop all of them right in there. And here we are going to carefully combine anything. We want our ingredients nicely combined. The batter does need to be uniform, but use a gentle hand. This method is kind of similar to when you're making muffins or a quick bread, and you don't want to overmix or things are going to be dense and disappointing. I'm just using a spatula here. No mixer needed for this recipe. Well, not till we get to the frosting anyway. We don't want to see any dry pockets of flour remaining. Always a good idea to check the bottom of your bowl. One little spot. All right, let's go ahead and bake some cupcakes. This recipe makes 12. It does double really well. No special changes needed if you want to double it. I'm just going to evenly divide the batter into the cupcake tin. I've found about 3 tablespoons of batter per cupcake liner works really well to divide it. So I'm just using my 1.5 tablespoon cookie scoop, and that way I get about 3 tablespoons per cupcake. Helps them bake nice and evenly. It's not an exact, it's just an about. I love this cookie scoop. I use it for so many things. And we have a bit more that we will just distribute. All right, we will take these over to the center rack of our 350-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. They typically need to bake about 18 to 20 minutes. I always do the toothpick test and check that a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean or with a few moist crumbs. All right, now we're going to let these cool in the cupcake pan for like 5 to 7 minutes, and then we're going to use a knife to carefully pry them out of the cupcake tin and move them to a cooling rack. You're going to want to do this to, one, stop the cooking because we don't want to overbake the cupcakes, but also because you can get some condensation and some moisture that really builds up on the bottom of the cupcake. So this is going to prevent that as well. Notice a little bit of butter on the bottom. That's fine. That should go away as they cool. While the cupcakes are cooling, we're going to make our frosting, which is an incredibly delicious brown sugar cream cheese frosting. It is amazing with the cupcakes. We're going to start with 8 ounces of brick style full fat cream cheese. We're also going to be adding 1/2 cup or 1 stick of butter. So I've been on this kick recently with frostings. I use salted butter these days. If you only have unsalted, you're just going to add an 1/8 teaspoon to a 1/4 teaspoon of salt to the frosting. Start with an 1/8, taste test, and adjust as needed. We're going to go ahead and mix these together until they're nice and smooth. How soon before I regret using this mixing bowl? I always need to use a larger one and I always go a little smaller. All right, and once that's nice and creamy and lump-free, we'll add our brown sugar. You need 1/4 cup or 50 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. Dark would probably be okay, just to give you a little more molasses flavor. And we're also going to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract as well. That is my 1/2 teaspoon. We'll just do 2 of these guys. We'll go ahead and mix everything together. And I do like to make sure I'm nice and thorough here because I want that brown sugar to integrate really well into the frosting, and I want it to kind of start to dissolve in with the butter and the cream cheese because I want to make sure we're not getting any grit there. A pinch of cinnamon would also work really well here if you wanted a little bit, you know, of like a spiced flavor to the frosting. I'm just giving this a mix. I'll stir it again real quickly. And then we're going to gradually add our powdered sugar. So we'll need 3 cups or 375 grams, but just add a bit at a time to keep yourself or your kitchen from wearing it. Oh, that was too much. This is gonna be bad. We're just gonna go with it. Start on low speed. And here's the point where I'm like, why didn't I get a bigger mixing bowl? How soon before I regret using this mixing bowl? Oh, we survived. Okay, we'll just add the rest now. I usually recommend doing that in like 4 parts, not 2. Okay, at this point, you're going to want to scrape the bowl and just kind of do a quick assessment and decide if you need the frosting to be smoother or not. I should say thinner. It should be totally smooth. Let me just work in a little more of that sugar. This frosting is on the silkier side. That's how I like it. So I want to make sure it's nice and soft. I don't want it to be soupy, but if it's not as thin as I want, I will add like a splash of cream. Like I have 2 tablespoons of cream measured out here, and sometimes I'll whip a little bit of that into the frosting. We'll add a little bit here real quick, and then we'll beat this for like 30 seconds on high speed. It's looking nice. Perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and put this in a piping bag. You can just spread the frosting on the cupcakes if you prefer. I'm going to pipe it on, and I'm using a large open star tip. This is an Attico 808. Yes, it is. Like I said, do it any way that you want. But since this is a softer frosting, I don't like to use like the open star tips because like the ridges just don't hold as well. I'll use my little tip for when I don't have an extra set of hands. Go ahead and twist that down. All right, time to decorate. I'll show you how I do this on mine real quickly, but of course, please feel free to decorate them however you prefer. That is how you make pumpkin cupcakes. I really want to know what you think of these and the frosting because it's amazing. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. All right, the best part of the day. I'll make sure you guys can see how these look inside. It was amazing. Oh my gosh. You wanna take a look at that? Oh, these cupcakes are beautiful. That is so good.